Hello and welcome to the last segment of your reading homework. This segment covers 116 through 121. Okay, page 116. You can push a man this way and you can push a man that way. Now the escort was ready. This time without any prayer, the head guard barked at them. Double time, get a move on. To hell with your get a move on. All the other columns were ahead of them. What sense was there in hurrying? The prisoners didn't have to be in the league with one another to figure the score. You kept us back, now it's our turn. The escort, too, after all, was dying for a warm corner. Step lively, shouted the guard. Step lively, you in front. To hell with your step lively. The Zeks marched with measured tread, hanging their heads as at a funeral. Now we've got nothing to lose. We'd be the last back anyhow. He wouldn't treat us like human beings. Now let him burst without shouting. On he went, step lively, but he realized it was futile. He couldn't order his men to shoot either. Thus prisoners were marching in five, keeping in line, all correct. He had no power to hound them faster. When they'd marched out to the work in the morning, the Zeks walked slowly to spare themselves. A man who's in a hurry won't live to see the end of his stretch. He'll tire and be done for. So on with regular, deliberate steps. The snow crunched under their boots. Some of them talked in low voices, others walked in silence. Shukov asked himself whether there was anything he had left undone in the camp that morning. Ah, the dispensary. Funny, he'd forgotten all about the dispensary while he'd been working. So, guys, dispensary is just where you get medicine. This must be around the consulting hour. He'd managed if he'd skipped his supper, but now somehow his back wasn't aching and his temperature wouldn't be high enough. A waste of time. He'd pulled through without benefit of the doctor. The only cure those do know is to put you in your grave. It wasn't the dispenser that appealed to him now. It was the prospect of adding something to his supper. His hopes were all pinned on that long overdue parcel of Tsars. A sudden change came over the column. It began to sway, a break out of its regular stride. The prisoners heaved forward with a buzz of excitement. Now the last five, which including Shukov, were no longer treading on the heels of the five in front. They had to run to keep up. A few more paces, and again they were running. When the rear of the column spilled over a rise, Shukov saw to the right, far away across the steppe, another dark column on the move, marching diagonally across their course. They too seemed to be forcing their pace. It must be from the machine works, that column. There were about 300 men in it. Another bunch with bad luck. Must have been held up, Shukov wondered why. To finish assembling some piece of machinery? They could be kept after work hours for that? But what did it matter to them? They worked all day in the warmth. Who'd get in first? The men ran, just ran. Even the escort broke into a jog trot. Only the head guard remembered to shout, "Don't fall back. Keep up there. You in the rear. Keep up." "Oh, shut your trap. Why are you yapping about?" As if we couldn't keep up. They forgot to talk. They forgot to think. Everyone in the column was obsessed by one idea, to get back first. Things were so lumped together, the sweet and the sour, that the prisoner saw the escort itself now as friend rather than foe. Now the enemy was the other column. Their spirits rose, their anger passed. Get a move on, the rear shouted to the front. Now our column had reached the street, while the others had passed out of sight behind the blocks of houses. They'd been racing blindly. It was easier for us now. We were running down the middle of the street, and our escort had less to stumble over the sides. This was where we ought to gain ground. There was another reason why we simply had to reach the camp gates first. The guards were unusually slow in searching the column for the machine works. Ever since Zeks began cutting one another's throats in the camp, the authorities had arrived at one conclusion. The knives were being made at the machine works and smuggled in. So the Zeks who worked there were gone over with special thoroughness on return to the camp. In late autumn, when the earth was already cold, the guards would shout at them, "Hold off with your boots, machine work squads. Hold your boots in your hands," and they would frisk them barefoot. Or despite the frost, they'd pick men out at random, shouting, "You, take off your right boot," and "You, take off your left." A Zek would pull off his boot, hopping on one foot, turn it upside down, and shake out the foot rag. "No knife, damn you." Shukov had heard, he didn't know whether it was true or not, that back in the summer the Zeks from the machine works had brought back 2 poles for a volleyball net, and that there were knives there inside them, 10 long knives in each pole, and now knives would turn up occasionally here and there. So it was at a jog trot that they passed the new club and the residential block and the wood processing plant, and reached the turning that led straight onto the gates. "Hoo!" shouted the whole column in unison. That was the turn we'd aim at reaching before the others. The rival column was 150 paces behind on our right. Now we could take things easy. Everyone was elated as a rabbit when it finds it can still terrify a frog. There lay the camp, just as we'd left it in the morning. Lights were on in the zone over the thick fence, specially powerful ones in front of the gatehouse. The entire area was flooded with light. It was as bright as day. They had to have it like that when they frisked us, but we hadn't reached the gates yet. Halt shouted a guard and handed his machine gun to a soldier, ran up close to the column. They weren't allowed to do that with their guns. All those on the right carrying firewood, dump it on to their right. He didn't have to guess about the firewood. The Zeks were carrying it quite openly. A bundle fell, a second, a third. Some would have liked to conceal a stick or two inside the column, but their neighbors objected. Throw it down as you're told. Do you want others to lose theirs because of you? Who's the Zek main enemy? Another Zek. If only they weren't at odds with each other. Ah, what a difference they'd make. Double time, shouted the head guard. They advanced toward the gates. Here, 5 roads converged. An hour earlier, all these other columns had met here. If they were paved, these roads, this would be just the place for the main square of a future city. And the processions would meet here, just as columns of Zeks did now, as they poured it from every direction, with sentries and guards all about. The guards were already warming themselves indoors. They came out and formed a cordon across the road. Unbutton your coats, unbutton your jackets. They pulled the Zeks' arms apart, the better to hug them and slap their sides, same as in the morning, more or less. It isn't so terrible to unbutton your coat now. We're going home. That's what everyone used to say, going home. We never had time to think of any other home. While the head of the column was being frisked, Shukov went over to Cesar. Excuse me. Cesar Markovich, I'll run straight to the parcel's office and keep a place in line for you. Cesar turned. The fringe of his dark mustache was tipped with frost. Why should you do that, Ivan Denisovich? Perhaps there won't be a parcel. Oh, well, it doesn't matter if there isn't. I'll wait 10 minutes anyway. If you don't turn up, I'll go to the barracks. Shukov reckoned like this. If Cesar didn't come, maybe someone else would. Then he could sell him his place in line. Obviously, Cesar was longing for his parcel. All right, Ivan Denisovich, run ahead and keep a place for me. Wait 10 minutes, no longer. And now Shukov was on the point of being frisked. Today he had nothing to conceal. He would step forward fearlessly. He slowly unbuttoned his coat and undid the rope belt around his wadded jacket, and although he couldn't remember having anything forbidden, 8 years in camp had given him the habit of caution. He thrust a hand into his pants pocket to make sure it was empty, and there was a small piece of broken hacksaw blade, the tiny length of steel that he'd pick up in his thriftiness at the building site without any intention of bringing it to camp. He hadn't meant to bring it, but now, what a pity to throw it away. Why, he could make a little knife out of it, very handy for shoe repairing or tailoring. If he had intended to bring it with him, he would have thought hard of where to conceal it. But now the guards were only 2 rows ahead, and the first of these rows were already stepping forward to be searched. His choice had to be as swift as the wind. Should he take cover behind the row in front of him and toss the bit of metal in the snow? It'd be noticed, but they wouldn't know who the culprit was, or keep it on him. For that strip of hacksaw, he could get 10 days in the cells if they classed it as a knife. But a cobbler's knife was money. It was bread. A pity to throw it away. He slipped it into his left mitten. At that moment, the next row was ordered to step forward and be searched. Now the last 3 men stood full in view, Stenka, Shukov, and the man from the 32nd Squad who had gone to look for the Moldavian. Because they were 3 and the guards facing them were 5, Shukov could try a ruse. He could choose which of the 2 guards on the right to present himself to. He decided against a young pink-faced one and plumped for an older man with a gray mustache. The older one, of course, was experienced and could find the blade easily if he wanted to. Because of his age, he would be fed up with the job. It must sink in his nose now like burning sulfur. Meanwhile, Shukov had removed both mittens, the empty one and the one with the hacksaw, and held them in one hand, the empty one in front, together with the untied rope belt. He fully unbuttoned his jacket, lifted high the edges of his coat and jacket. Never had he been so servile at the search, but now he wanted to show he was innocent. Come on, frisk me. And at the word of command, stepped forward. The guard slapped Shukov's sides and back and outside the pants of his pocket. Nothing there. He needed the edges of coat and jacket. Nothing there either. All right, guys, that's the end of your reading homework. Remember, you need 3 annotations. Come see me if you need help with anything.